Hi, everyone. My name is Cleopatra Wise, and I am the moderator for this session. I'm so excited to be joined here by Arieh Smith, and also Morgan Jones will be joining us a little bit later. So, first off, Arieh Smith is better known as XiaoMa of the, dare I say, pretty popular YouTube channel of 4.1 million subscribers, XiaoMa NYC. His channel is filled with interesting content like him rapping Doja Lun songs in New York City's Chinatown to him handing out $5,000 in home bouts to Chinese restaurants. But to truly grasp what he does, I wanted to play a short clip of his YouTube channel. So I'm going to put that up now. Let me find it.
我再拍一个，对，给，不是，So guys, I got a really cool comment on YouTube the other day. It was from a very nice guy who said something like, "Hey XiaoMa, you know all these restaurants in New York City are hurting, and a lot of restaurants are closing down. Why don't you set up like some kind of like fund to support them?" So I was thinking, why not just give them a really big tip? So that's what we're gonna do today.
So that's just a short video, but if you're interested in learning more about XiaoMa, you can certainly go to his YouTube channel. So XiaoMa, why don't you just introduce yourself to the audience?
Yeah, well, first of all, thank you, Cleopatra, and also Asia Society so much for inviting me here. Really happy to be here. And yeah, basically my channel is, it started as a Chinese vlog. I lived in China for a year in 2009. And after I came back to the US, I was making videos in Chinese. And I eventually started posting videos on YouTube, but also on Chinese social media as just like a Chinese language like vlog, like just talking about my life in New York for mainly a mainland Chinese audience. At some point it kind of evolved into this like different but interesting channel where like Americans were kind of became very interested in watching me like buy groceries and order in restaurants in Chinese, which to me was very surprising because like I did that kind of stuff every day. But it was really cool. And so, I've been doing the life of a YouTuber and content creator, because I also post on TikTok and Facebook for 3-4 years now, 5 years maybe, full time.
So I always like to ask this question to everyone who's interested in China. Why China? How did you actually become interested in China and learning Chinese?
Yeah, I mean, the honest answer was it was totally random. I was reading a post. This was back when they still had like paper newspapers. So, when I was graduating college, there was an ad in the New York Times, like classified for a free Chinese class for high school students. And so, I was graduating high school, but I was still really interested in taking the class. So I emailed the director and I asked, "Hey, could I do this class?" Because in high school I had learned like Latin and Greek, and those were like not really modern languages, and so I was really interested in trying to learn a language that people actually spoke. So I emailed her, and she was like, "Hey, this is great. You should come and do it." And I did it for that summer at Hunter College in New York. I loved it. I had such a great time learning Chinese, and I had no idea that I would be so interested in this. And it was so cool for me to go into, Chinatown and try to like practice my Chinese. And then when I went to college, first year of college, I decided to keep taking classes. So like I did the Chinese 101 thing, and that's like, that's like the 30-second version, but happy to go into more detail if you want.
Of course. And now we also have Morgan Jones joining us. So I'll give a brief introduction of him. So he is the Director of Community Engagement and Partnerships at the Avenues World School here in New York City. Morgan has worn many hats over his career, from working at the New York City's mayor's office to serving as the COO of the U.S. China Strong Foundation, and he now is working in education. So same question, Morgan. Tell the audience a little bit about yourself and why China? Why did you end up learning Chinese? Why did you become interested in China?
Thank you so much for that question, and great to see you, Cleopatra, XiaoMa, ni hao. And just great to be here on the stream. I apologize for my delay. This is another Zoom presentation, or sort of online presentation overall for me, so I appreciate everyone for having me. I'm born and raised in New York City myself. Grew up in Brooklyn. Went to high school at Midwood High School at Brooklyn College, public school in New York City, and hung out with everybody. Didn't matter if you're black, white, Asian, Latino, Latina, whoever you were, come as you are, and I'm just happy to see you as a person. And I hung out with everybody, but there's a good number of classmates who are Asian in my classes, and they hung out with me. They invited me to the Asian sort of society club in high school, and then they would invite me over to 8th Avenue over in Brooklyn, Badadao, right? And yeah, you know the deal. So invited me over. I ate all the food because I played football in high school, but at that point I didn't know anything about Chinese language and culture. Like, what do I know, really? I'm just a kid from Brooklyn, like that. And then they invited me to their homes to meet their parents and stuff. And the parents barely spoke any English, but they were warm to me as well too. And again, gave me more food and spoke with me about the experience of being a student in high school, and did it in kind of somewhat broken English. And I was like, man, what could I do to meet people more than halfway? And one of the best ways to do that is with language. And they even told me, they're like, you're the first Black kid to ever come inside my house. And I'm like, I don't know how I feel about that. Am I a pioneer of sorts, or like, are we missing something here? So I decided I want to learn Mandarin Chinese, and I got the opportunity from the Posse Foundation to apply for school at Middlebury College. I won a full tuition scholarship to go there. I always knew I wanted to do Chinese because of the high school experiences, and they have a big immersive program at Middlebury. And I just went in all in head first into it. As hard as it was that first year, I just stuck with it, and that's how the beginning started. Also, my father took Kung Fu for a little bit too, by the way. He did take some Kung Fu, so I think that played a role. That was when I was a little kid, and we'd watch some of the Kung Fu movies and everything. So I think on the side, and I remember seeing like Xi on TV when I was like 4 or something like that. Journey to the West. It was on like PBS or something, and I remember just seeing it and like, why is a monkey fighting this other pig, or hanging out and moving around, and they're all speaking this interesting language, and I'm like 3 or 4. So those are the background of why Chinese, why China, and all that fun stuff.
No, I love to hear people's Chinese stories and why they became interested in Chinese. There's a common sentiment that Chinese is such a difficult language to learn. So both of you are fluent in Chinese, as am I. So tell me a little bit about how you actually ended up mastering the language, and what helped you master Chinese. So why don't we start off with you, XiaoMa?
So I started in China in 2009. I got a scholarship to go there and learn Chinese at Beijing Language and Culture University, BLCU, which is like all foreigners from all over the world. They just, the Chinese government puts them all there to learn Chinese, and you're staying in like this gigantic like 20-story building that's just every floor is like a different country. So you got like the Tongans on the 7th floor and like the North Koreans on the 8th floor, and I'm not even kidding, that's how it worked. But so I went there with the idea of like, okay, I'm going to spend this year and just learn Chinese like a madman, like just go 100% on this thing, because that prior year in college I had just gotten so into it. And I was like, man, this is so much fun learning Chinese. And also, when you speak Chinese to Chinese people, as a foreigner, they get very interested in like, how, like, that's so cool, you're learning, our language, and like, et cetera, et cetera. So I felt like I had this really strong motivation to want to get really good at it. So I spent that year really focusing on Chinese, like all the time, like 24/7. The first thing I did when I woke up in the morning was turn on the TV, which I would just start playing, Chinese Central Television News at 8 in the morning. And, I'd go out to the cafeteria on my walks there. I'd have like a little MP3 player playing like, Chinese music or like Chinese news on loop. I refused to hang out with other Americans. I'm only going to hang out with Chinese people this entire year. And I got pretty good as a result, mostly of that like immersion experience. And also, one thing I didn't mention was that the prior year, the summer of that prior year, I did this college program called Princeton in Beijing, which was a super, super immersion program. It's similar, Morgan, you mentioned Middlebury, it's kind of a similar immersion experience to that. Like, you spend 2 months and they're like, all right, if you speak English this entire program, like you're kicked out, including to the other American college students in the class. So for me, that was really like an eye-opening experience. I was like, okay, this is how you really go and learn a language. And so I wanted to replicate that in, the rest of the time I was in China, and I tried to.
And what about you, Morgan?
All right, here we go. I'm unmuted. Sorry. Yeah, kind of an interesting thing for me, different than XiaoMa, is that, starting to learn Mandarin Chinese was here in the States. So I had to kind of create spaces for me to be able to work with my language, but luckily I was in school. One of the things that I remember that was really great about learning Chinese at Middlebury, and I think a lot of those schools do this, is, they had opportunities like a language table where you're going to lunch, and you're going to sit at a table where other people are having lunch as well. But at that table you're going to, you're only speaking Mandarin. Like, that's it. And there's a server who's a student, and I've been a server too in the school. And they're going to serve you, and they're going to do it all in Mandarin as well. So it's kind of like impressed upon you. I lived in a Chinese house. They had a dorm for it in school in Vermont. And we can only do that. And you had to sign a pledge as well to make sure you don't speak that another language. So language pledges are really important. And then, it'd be really funny. XiaoMa, it's funny you mentioned about talking with other foreigners. And, while there definitely are some foreigners that are just like not really speaking Chinese, but then there are some who do, and they want to practice with you, especially if you're trying to find other people that are willing to work with you. So they'll be like, I can totally see you and me, XiaoMa. I love your YouTube channel. I really do. I watch it. It's amazing. I could totally see you and I at one point just speaking with each other in Mandarin just to get some practice going if there wasn't that environment around us, because we could just do it and do our best to try and keep up with each other for ourselves as far as the Mandarin language learning. But yeah, nothing was better than eventually visiting China. And my first time going to China was in 2002. And I was in Beijing, and I already had some skills behind me because of all the practice there in school at Middlebury. And I did the language program during the summer, but then also just boom, being planted in there, seeing the Chinese characters around me everywhere. And I'm not in Flushing, Queens. I'm not in 8th Avenue. I'm not over at Chinatown. I'm straight up in China. I'm straight up in Beijing. I'm in like there it is, the central part, all of it's right there. So I think that's how it kind of all sprouted up from there, from language skills and background.
So definitely immersion and exposure is key. But obviously, because of COVID, no one can really go to China, or it's quite difficult to go to China. So how are both of you maintaining your language skills? How are you improving your Chinese here in the United States?
Flushing. It's really, I have a Chinese wife. So for me, it's been, I speak Chinese every day. But in the absence of that, when I moved back from China this was before I met her, I guess, when I moved back from China to the US and I started working in New York. This is before I started doing YouTube as a full-time thing. I had actually wanted to maintain my Chinese. Like, that was very top of mind for me. I wanted to be like, all right, I was just living in Beijing doing this hardcore Chinese immersion. But when I come back to the US, like, my biggest fear was, what if I just forget all of this? Like, I felt like I had been given this second soul, this other life in Chinese, and I had made all these friendships and met all these people and done all these cool things exclusively in Chinese. And I felt like, all right, if I'm moving back to the US, I don't want to forget this language and culture that I became so interested in. So I moved to Chinatown in Manhattan. But that was honestly kind of like a bit of a culture shock too, moving to New York City, Chinatown from Beijing, because a lot of people, like, what they don't really tell you in like the Chinese textbooks is that a lot of Chinese people don't necessarily speak Mandarin or speak Mandarin like well. So particularly in like among the older generation and in other countries. So My first experience was renting an apartment from this older woman who, at first I was like, oh, she's Chinese, she must speak Mandarin. But then I tried speaking with her, and like, she doesn't really understand what I'm saying. I don't understand what she's saying, and it turns out she speaks Cantonese, but like a different dialect of Cantonese that the other Cantonese friends can't really understand even what she's saying. And so there were definitely a lot of linguistic barriers to preserving my Mandarin. But that was like, for me, I just really wanted to live in a place where I could use Chinese in my day-to-day life.
Yeah, I mean,
that's great. And the audience is requesting a video between you and Morgan. So let's make that happen.
Yeah.
Let's do this. I'm ready. Go hit up Flushing together.
We'll go order some xiaolongbao.
I was gonna say too, like, definitely same thing. My wife is from China too, but I my daughter as well. She's 4 and she's in pre-K, and she's in an immersion program in our school here over at Avenues where I currently work, and she speaks both English and Chinese. So I get a lot of like inspiration from her. Like, I totally wish that I was like 4 years old speaking Mandarin like it's no tomorrow, and she just does it, switches effortlessly. So I get a lot of motivation from her, and sometimes I learn new things from her. I'm like, how did you know that word? And maybe she got it from mom, my wife, or she got it from grandma thanks to chatting on WeChat or something like that, because we do that often as well too. But I'm just inspired by how effortlessly she's able to get it at such a young age. And then it's almost like our own secret language. But then at the same time, some people will see me and her speaking. I'm mostly speaking English with her, really, to keep her native English up, because they're both native languages for her. But some people will hear us speak, and they're just like, "What are these two? Why is it? Who is this? Like, what? I don't even know what to think." And I'm like, ha, ha, ha. That's how you fool your enemies. So it's a wonderful thing. Or just get people thinking that like there's a much broader world of individuals that are out there that are interested in this language, and it's starting at different late ages too. So that's sort of how I'm able to kind of keep up with things for me, family and Flushing.
No, that's definitely great. So in terms of, speaking Chinese, obviously there's plenty of Chinese speakers all over the world, but is it still quite novel for you to be a Chinese speaker that is of non-Chinese heritage? So Morgan, you spoke a little bit about that. So why don't you take this question first?
Yeah, I still get that novelty here. And it's really interesting because people will tell me, like, actually this past Saturday this happened. We had a book fair with our school, and one of our parents was there, and the parent is actually, they're originally from China, and heard me start speaking, and they're just like, oh wow. And then I went to a different level of like how much technical I'm going to get, and then they're like, and then it's just like shock, like complete shock. So that still occurs. I mean, to be frank, they're not. I mean, there's not that many Black people speaking Chinese, although that is changing. And I wanna give a lot of credit to different groups. I mean, you yourself, Cleopatra, as well, and there's also the Black China Caucus that exists. So I got to give a shout out to that, and just different groups of individuals that are out there to show that in another regard. And I'm somewhat early in a sense, because I started learning Chinese in 2000. That's when I started. So there's been like 21 years of this. And so people still are shocked. I don't know if, again, similar to like being told you're the first Black person to enter our home, if that's a good thing or a bad thing, because there's just so many, people who are from China that speak English pretty decently as well too. And, my wife being one of them, and she's really strong at English and like basically close to native, more or less, even though she's from China. But there's still a novelty behind it. Chinese is not necessarily, it's not the most easiest language to know, and the characters and the tones and everything. So there is some novelty in that. And then particularly for people who don't speak Chinese at all, and then they see me speaking, they still don't really expect it. What is it? Some like 4% or 5% of like people that speak Chinese versus like, or learning Chinese, I should say, versus like 80% are speaking Spanish. I don't have all the right numbers, Cleopatra. You probably know better than me, but like, that's what I remember researching when I used to work on them in a nonprofit that dealt with, learning Mandarin Chinese and getting more Americans to learn the language. So it's still a novelty in its own right based on how many people do it. But I think that's just kind of what makes it special and important in light of the way the world works and in light of, I guess, sort of globalization. Or, I live in New York, we're in New York City, a good number of us. So there's a good number of Chinese speakers that are here that are from China. So, but there's still some novelty that's behind that because of the deep culture and the language and the exposure, the need for more teachers in this country that speak Mandarin Chinese and can teach others how to learn this language really well in a way that's meaningful. That's super important. So there's still some novelty, but I think that novelty also means that there's still work to do as far as that mutual cultural understanding.
That's great. And Arieh?
Yeah, I think it's still, for Chinese people, totally novel to see non-Chinese people speaking Chinese. I mean, I compare it with the experiences that I have speaking Spanish. Like, I speak pretty decent Spanish. I'll use that in restaurants or grocery stores, but it's very rare that somebody like, and I'm like not Latino and I have like an accent, so it's like clear that I'm a Spanish learner. People people never bat an eye at me speaking Spanish, and in some ways it's a good thing, right? Because it helps you feel like you can blend into the culture more easily. But it's just not, it's not really a novel. Like, so many people learn Spanish. With Chinese, like, it's just, I think, Morgan was talking about like the barriers to entry there. Like, learning the language is very difficult. Like, the writing system, it's so unfamiliar to native English speakers that few people attempt to learn it, and I think even fewer people get to like a high level. So and while you can see plenty of people like on TV or on YouTube who are not Chinese speaking Chinese, I think for most Chinese people, when they encounter, like, most Chinese people have probably never encountered in person somebody who's not Chinese, who's learned Chinese to a high level. And so when you talk with them in Chinese at a high level as a foreigner, as a visible foreigner, it's for them, it's oftentimes a very new experience. So they'll often be quite surprised.
Yes, I definitely resonate with that. As I'm walking the streets of New York with my colleagues speaking in Chinese. I definitely get the stares and the looks, and I like to enter into conversations on the subway with old Chinese men. So it's super fun to do that. So if ever you all want to do that with me, we should totally do that. In any case, Morgan, you've had such an extensive career in many different fields, from education to nonprofit world, to university. So how have you leveraged your Chinese throughout your career, and how has that given you certain opportunities?
Yeah, thanks for that question. I mean, I've had lots of different kind of career changes and experiences, and not just limited to being in the United States, but also in China as well too. I've been a Chinese language radio show host. I've worked under two mayors in New York City. I've helped lead a nonprofit. I'm currently in education as well. So it's all these various experiences, but I try to find sort of like what are the interests or at least skills that I think I'm really good at that I can hone in on each of these things. And so one aspect of it obviously is Chinese language, and just that baseline of that and keeping that going. And then the other aspect of it, particularly since being in the States, has been a focus on service and public service and working with the community and community engagement. So understanding your neighbors, understanding what their needs are, how can you respond to those needs and connect resources between different groups, be it's a government entity or another nonprofit or a business, small or large, an education environment. So really kind of honing in on those. And some of the roles have had very deep Chinese language experiences, and some of them not much at all. But I try to find opportunities with the ones not much at all, where I could use my Mandarin Chinese. So if I hear that there's a particular entity that might be visiting our organization, or we may be thinking about something and it might be in a particular part of our city or a part of our area where there's a large number of Chinese speakers, just asking to be a part of that, and using that ask to be able to show that I want to work and I want to do more, which I think any supervisor or organization would want or need. So aligning those things. And then when you're in an environment, or when you're, or better yet, before that, when you're applying into an environment that has, when you're applying for certain roles, being strategic and direct about looking for entities that do have a global footprint and that may have a China footprint. And so currently where I'm at now at Avenues, there is a school in Shenzhen. We have Mandarin language here in school, and there's lots of opportunities for me to speak. Actually, some of the most opportunities I've had to speak in quite a while in terms of adding that into my professional environment. So, it's a mix of finding those things and doing a little bit of outreach if you lack that environment, but also being very strategic in terms of when you're looking into that next environment, what place has that global footprint that you're looking for that you can sort of enter into. Otherwise, you can be like XiaoMa and create your own. I think it takes work, obviously, to do that. And not saying that it's like, oh, it's work, but it's like, it does take work and strength and ability and courage to be able to go out and do that in such an independent and entrepreneurial way. Is it doable? It definitely is, but just keep that in mind that that's what you're going to need to do. But if it's going to be the other way of finding careers and job opportunities, you'll need to be strategic, or you're just going to need to go out and grab that opportunity as you can when it comes along in the organization that you're in. Hopefully you're gaining other skills at the same time to build off of that.
Finding opportunities is definitely key. And I love how you really talked about finding those opportunities that have Chinese language or have a global footprint. I think oftentimes we talk about Chinese career opportunities as being based in China and not really focusing on the opportunities that exist within the US. So Arieh, you started your own YouTube channel. It's very successful, very much creative and amazing content. How have you used your Chinese to create opportunities within the creator space? And just essentially give us some context as to why you even quit your day job to start the channel in the first place.
Yeah, so I had actually been, again, like languages and Chinese, it had been a passion of mine for years after coming back from China. And it was something that I always was like, man, I love Chinese and I love learning languages. And it would be great to do something with it as like a career, like a job, like a business, like something, But I wanted to do it full time, but I couldn't figure out like how to do this. Like I was like, what, like, nobody in America cares that I can speak Chinese, right? That was what I thought. I was like, people in China, the fact that I speak Chinese, yeah, it's cool. They like it, and if I wanted to live in China, make a career in China, there are foreigners who make careers of speaking Chinese in China, plenty of them. But I didn't really want that. And so I was like, all right, I'm living in America. I'm working in finance. I'm working as a software engineer. Like, great. This is my life. But I had this like dream on the side. I was like, oh, there's something, there's gotta be something here that I can do. Right. So I was on the side. It's just like a passion project. I was like making videos in Chinese, like a kind of like a fun vlog, eating hot pot and all these other things. And I started getting a little bit of an audience, mostly like Chinese people in China. And so I thought, okay, this is kind of cool. Like maybe I can, be a content creator. But it really wasn't like, it wasn't enough. Like it wasn't to the point where I felt like I could really sustain myself as a career, as a business. But a few years ago, I decided, I was like, I'm having so much fun doing this. And I think like, cause I was getting enough traffic and kind of having a little bit more money to the point where I felt like I could do this as a full time. And, I was fortunate enough to have some savings from my previous job. So I was like, let me just quit and see if I could do this as a thing. And maybe if I'm going at it full time, I could actually turn it into like a real career. Right. So I did that. And for the first couple of years, nothing happened. Like I was getting views and, and it was great. And people were like, hey, I love your videos, but I wasn't making money and I couldn't support myself. And I was just eating into my savings. And I was like, all right, a couple years in, I was like ready to throw in the towel, and I was like, all right, I'm going back to coding. Here we go. Brushing up. Like I literally have like these stacks of coding interview books that I was preparing, and I was like, all right, I'm going back. I'm going back in. But then again, like these videos of me, buying groceries in Chinatown. Like I still remember the first one that I did. I almost didn't post it because I thought, this is so terrible. Like, who cares about this video? I'm just buying. Like, what am I doing here? Like, super dumb. But it worked. It worked out, and that was the point where I felt like, okay, now I can actually do this for a living. So and I felt really grateful once I actually hit that spot, because it was like this is what I knew that I wanted to do for like decades. But I was like, now I actually feel like I can finally like have a career based on my passion.
No, that's amazing. Someone in the chat said, this is a story I want to hear, the legend of XiaoMa. So we definitely love your origin story. And I am curious to know what helped you take that leap and transition into becoming an entrepreneur and a creator. What advice do you have for other young people who are interested in taking their own leaps, whether it be quitting their day job or just not having a day job and just doing their own thing, forging their own path?
Right. To be honest, I am not going to give you like the kind of like the hippy dippy advice of like, oh yeah, just follow your passion, bro. Like, just do whatever you want. Like, it's okay, man. You don't need a job. like for me, it was always like, I'm going to do this purely as a side passion project, hobby, until I have some evidence that I can make a living on this thing before going full time on it. Because I'm not going to quit my job, when I'm making a decent living and can like afford rent in New York City, which isn't easy. And I was doing that, and I was like, I'm not gonna quit this to go make videos on Bilibili, which is like the Chinese YouTube, until I can prove to myself that there's something here, right? So I was doing it as a passion project, as a hobby, until it started getting like a little bit of traction. I was like, I think there's something here, like I enjoy the process of making videos, and I was starting to get like some sponsorships. Restaurants were saying, hey, come down to a restaurant, make a video here, we'll pay you. And so I felt like, okay, I can see a road towards like profitability in this enterprise, and I felt like if I really gave it my all, and if I really, and again, I had that. Not everybody is in this position, but I was fortunate to have that like financial security where I was able to quit my job without worrying about being able to pay rent. Like I had that. So and not everybody can do that. But so I would say, from my perspective, if you really want to do these like artistic or creative or passion projects, or have a startup, I think it's amazing, and I think you should totally do it. But I would say try to have the rest of your house in order, before you go and do that. Like be able to say, and also give yourself like some kind of runway. Be like, like, okay, I'm gonna spend a year on this, and at the end of that year, if there's no like roadway towards actually being able to make a living doing this, then I'm going to go back to what I was doing. Like that was what I said to myself. And then that year came, and I was like, okay, things are doing decently, not amazing, but I was like, I can keep doing this. So I was like, all right, let's give myself another year. And then I gave myself another year. And then after that last year, I was like, okay, now I can abandon this plan because I know I can do this. But until then, I kept giving myself those plans, and I kept telling myself, like, I'm just going to do this for 1 year. And if after that year I haven't reached this milestone, I'm going straight back to software engineering.
Definitely some wise words and practical advice. So I'm moving into community building. Both of you have some sort of role to play in terms of building community or fostering community between, Americans, our global citizens, and Chinese people. So Morgan, can you tell me a little bit about how you are building community and leveraging your Chinese to do so within your role?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'm fortunate to work with the future of us, our children and students, and so As I mentioned, there are many students that are learning Mandarin. They're learning it in an immersive environment or maybe an intensive environment. They have different levels. Some are beginner, some are very fluent, some may even be native as well too. And so one of the things that I encourage them to do is, in order to really deeply learn about the language itself, and we push this at Avenues as well too, is that you're not just learning language based on the content, but you're learning language based on the context. So how do you apply what you're learning in terms of your Mandarin and using it in real life scenarios and real life situations? So one example that we've done in our school, and this happened during the pandemic as well too, and I actually just spoke with a Spanish class about this earlier today. During the pandemic, there were many seniors that were homebound because concern about risks related to COVID-19. And our school, we're fortunate to have forged some really great relationships with our city council member here and some of the neighborhood housing associations in our immediate area, and local nonprofits also that we can partner with and reach out to that have a great network of seniors that live around us that may not have people that are talking with them because they're homebound and they're stuck at home, and they could be feeling lonely. They could be feeling depressed. They may not have information to news or all the proper sources with regards to how to respond or deal or get the things that you need during COVID-19. And so we were added into a list of people to call and making wellness calls in our community. And so we as a school made about 200 calls, and a good portion of those calls were made in Chinese. And we had our students making those calls along with our faculty members and using Mandarin Chinese with the seniors in the community to ask, do you need food? Do you need medicine? Do you know the information about where to get vaccinated? Do you know the information of where to get voter registration? And doing that completely in Mandarin Chinese with people who also speak Mandarin Chinese and don't speak English. And so those are some ways that we try and find a means to be able to get our students to use real life scenarios in order to help people in our community. And so we're helping ourselves by learning Chinese, but at the same time, we're helping others get the information and resources that they need to live another day, to be able to make it through this really tough time in this pandemic. Not everybody's digitally savvy and can use programs like these to get online. Sometimes it just needs to take a phone call or a note on the door being like, we're thinking of you. We want to help you. 我们都会想你的。你不是孤独，你不是唯一的，我们都在. We're all here, And so those are some of the reasons and some of the ways that we try and work through that. And we do this in a myriad of ways, but that's just one example that comes immediately to mind. And getting kids to start on that now is such a great thing for us when we're all soon to be old. So not to say that, you're all forever young, but that's sort of one example that I share.
Thank you. So Morgan has to drop off soon. So Morgan, before you go, what advice do you have for students on how they can leverage Chinese throughout their career?
Oh, yeah. Thank you so much. And I'm sorry I have to hop off shortly, everybody. I would say one thing is, and I want to say XiaoMa and I approach this a little bit, is, having Chinese as a language, but also having another skill or another sort of thing that you can have to work with your language skills, so you can kind of move around in different industries and try different things, but also still have that Chinese language in your background. Chinese is a great tool, but also sometimes you need to have those other skills. And XiaoMa mentioned it too. Not everyone cares in America that you speak Chinese, but try and work it in different angles and you may be able to find your place. And then I had mentioned this slightly earlier, so I guess I'll sort of summarize it as well too. But sometimes you're going to need to go out and find those ways. There may not be one path to be able to do it. You may have to devise certain plans. And I love that XiaoMa mentioned planning being really important. So you need to go out and be strategic. And I think there's a lot of connection between strategy and plans and all of this. So being thoughtful about where you're going to get those opportunities from, and doing that wherever you're at right now, even if it doesn't scream, this is Chinese language, it's great for you, but like, you're going to have to find it within that opportunity, Or if you're entering that job force and you're looking, find places with that global footprint. Find places that already have some sort of connection with China as well too, and you may be able to go back there. You may be able to use Chinese language wherever, whatever country or location that you're in right now, and do something more meaningful with your skills and language. I still think that there's definitely a need that's out there from the 21 years that I've been, seeing China, and it's definitely improved since I started Mandarin Chinese. So, Jiao, good luck with all that. You can do it.
Thank you, Morgan. And so now on to you, Ari. What also advice do you have for young people as they're starting on their career? How can they leverage Chinese throughout their career?
I mean, I would say if you can get the opportunity to go to China and live there for some amount of time, or even for a while, like years, I mean, it's really incredible. And for me, that was the first thing that kind of really sparked my interest in the Chinese language and culture, was just being there. I mean, it's just such an amazing, dynamic place to live in. And if I could like roll back the clock, I honestly probably would have stayed in China long. I was only there for a year, but I might have even gone, because the Chinese government is very, very happy and excited to have foreigners come to China and learn Chinese. And I think it would have helped me a lot if I had actually done like a full undergrad. And, I completed my undergrad in the US, but had I done it there, and spent like 4 years in Chinese undergrad learning Chinese or, whatever, I think it would have been really, really incredible. And I mean, now obviously with COVID, it's different, but there's still a lot of places in the world you can travel to and, learn other languages, not just Chinese necessarily. But, in terms of the US, like, I mean, yeah, try to find that niche where you can use Chinese in an interesting way, and you can. It's honestly, it's even valuable in like there's some unexpected. Like I used to work in finance, and it actually came in handy when studying certain companies that have a lot of business activities in China, because you can do research and like figure out like, okay, well, this company is selling this in China. Let's figure out if their sales are all legit, that kind of thing. So it can really come in handy in like unexpected ways. And so keep your eyes open.
Okay, thank you, Ari, for this wonderful conversation, and thank you to Morgan Jones as well. We hope you have a great rest of your day, and to all of the attendees, please join us in the breakout sessions, which start in the next couple of minutes at 1:35 Eastern Time. Thank you, Ari. Bye.
Thanks.